Okay, so a couple weeks ago, I had the pleasure of watching Scott Pilgrim Takes Off. And before I say anything about it, I feel like I should talk about my familiarity with the Scott Pilgrim series, franchise, however you want to say it. I have not read the comic, I have not played the game, but I have seen the movie several years ago, and I feel like I remember the gist of it. Like, I remember quite a few of the set pieces. I remember the basic plot. I feel like I remember the ending with, like, Nega Scott and all that pretty damn well. And I went into the show having an idea of what it was about. Not just because of my familiarity, but I did know that this is not a one-to-one adaptation. I mean, I guess none of them are really one-to-ones, but this is not just an adaptation. It is telling its own version of the story. You get a lot more focus on Ramona. You get a lot more attention to the evil exes, etc., etc. And there's a part of my brain that goes, okay, we have a comic, we have a game, we have a movie, and now we have a show, and there's a part in the show, like there's a subplot of the story of Scott Pilgrim being adapted into an off-Broadway musical. Is that gonna be the next way this story is told or adapted? Is it gonna be Scott Pilgrim versus the World or Scott Pilgrim's Precious Little Life, the musical? And are they gonna bring back all the actors from the show, which are the actors from the movie, to play themselves in the musical? Like, is there gonna be this whole song that Chris Evans has about, like, being a skateboarder, or is he just gonna sing My United States of whatever during a skateboarding montage? I don't know. But I hope it happens. I hope I get the chance to see it. But let's go into the plot. Let's see. It's like I was writing the plot down, and the more I did, just the more I was laughing. It's like you watch it, you're like, yeah, this is fucking absurd, and that's what makes it great. And then you just kind of write it down and really reflect on it, and you're like, this is so batshit insane. I love it. I love it so fucking much. So just kind of the progression of it, like, okay, boy meets girl. Girl has 7 evil exes. And the boy fights the exes to win her heart. Like, okay, that's maybe a little bit off kilter from what you would normally expect from a rom-com, but it's almost kind of believable. Also, the fact that boy and girl both have their own problems. Boy is a man-child. He often lacks accountability. Girl is someone who is fucking terrible with communication. And the reason she has 7 evil exes is because she kept leaving this, like, trail of broken hearts in her wake. Then you get to the part where boy is seemingly killed, girl investigates his death, which leads to her making peace with all of the evil exes, and you find out that the boy did not die, he actually disappeared through a vegan portal. How did I say this? It was, sorry, I just heard the dog bark. I'm gonna pause this real quick, and then we're gonna get back to this so I can go and let the dog. Okay, so, as I was saying, it was, boy disappears through vegan portal, which is opened by a robot that was created by X's 5 and 6, specifically on request from boy's future self to avoid him meeting with girl because his heart was also broken along the way. After that, boy's future self, just in case this plan didn't work, specifically put nanomachines, because nanomachines, son, specifically put nanomachines in his past self that would keep him from kissing girl back in the past because it would make a force field in between them. And when they're trying to get past the force field, he shows up and kidnaps them from the off-Broadway one-man show adaptation of the series that they are involved in and takes them and their friends and their enemies to have a fight because it is still Scott Pilgrim versus the world. But evil Scott, or future Scott, is the one fighting against the world, and he is taking the place of Nega Scott in this, which I think is actually kind of neat. But then future version of the girl shows up, and she is not really part of the fight, but they don't really fight the two of them. She's just kind of letting him know, it's like, no, like, we could have fixed this. You should have been fighting for us, not against us. But it's also not too late to clean up your mistakes. But after all the shit you've done and all the time that you didn't try and fight for me, we can't just go back to being normal, but maybe we can try, which leads to the past, which are, you know, actually the present versions of Scott and Ramona saying, you know what? Maybe there's hope. Because despite all of this insanity and bullshit and a robot being the perfect version of a vegan, I learned that I love you and that you love me. And even after all of this, a relationship can still happen. And now that I've seen what our mistakes can turn us into, I know not to make those mistakes in a very Shiro Archer Fate Stay Night kind of way. And like, as I was watching that fight, I was like, this is some Shiro Archer shit. And it's great. And that's the plot. And it's great. And like I said, you're like, this is fucking insane. And then you think about it a little more, you're like, no, yeah, this is completely unhinged. Boy, I had a great fucking time watching this. Now I just want to shout out some of the fights I really liked. The fight between Matthew Patel and Gideon Graves, who at that point is not Gordon Goose, it's still Gideon Graves. Specifically when he summons his demon hipster chicks and they're in like a basketball. He's like, all right, girls, full court press. And they're like passing the ball and shit. And I'm just thinking to myself, please literally dunk on him. Please literally dunk on him. And then he literally dunks on Gideon. I was cracking up. I thought that was great. The fight between Roxy and Ramona, I think is actually my favorite fight. I love them like going... They're fighting in a movie store, so of course that makes it so that they're somehow inside of the movies, and they keep just kind of going from set piece to set piece. I think at one point they're in like a samurai movie, I think at one point they're on a train, and they're on like a fucking plane and shit. I was like, this is so cool. And I think Kim is watching the movie and actively fucking with it, and like using the remote, so Roxy exits the movie, breaks the remote, and then they go back to the fight. While also getting a lot of like characterization for Roxy. It's like they are literally working out their problems through the fight. I think it's a really cool way to do it. The fight between Lucas Lee and all the paparazzi bitches, I just thought that was neat as fuck. Like, it just fucking shit up doing all these cool skateboard tricks. The fight between Ramona and Wallace Wells' stunt doubles. That's really fun. I just love Wallace talking shit to the stunt doubles and eventually like, hey man, we could take the physical abuse of, you know, being a stunt double and like getting into this fight, but your emotional abuse is hitting us too hard. We quit. Like, that was kind of fucking gold. And then yeah, just future Scott versus the world. And like I said, it's this very Shiro Archer fight, which I've said is one of my favorite parts of Fate Stay Night, having read the Ding Dang VN. It's really cool to watch, and I feel like it's very cathartic for the characters, very emotionally satisfying. So I just want to talk about some of the fun shit. Just a lot of the goofy shit, either like the scenarios or just some of the lines that I really liked and made me laugh. I'm sorry, I thought this video was going to be quite a bit longer. I don't think it is. It's just go watch it. It's fucking insane, but there is a very strong emotional core at the center of all of it that keeps it from just being, this is just weird and wacky, but it won't stick with you kind of thing. But some of the fun shit that is wacky as hell, that will probably stick with me. Just the fucking Sonic Riz at the start. Like, hey, do you know Sonic the Hedgehog? Did you know in the 90s that there's two different versions? There were two Sonic cartoons. There's one that was really dark and one that's about like chili dogs and robots. And isn't it weird that the guy that was voicing Sonic like voiced two different versions of the same character? Which is a great meta joke about how Michael Cera played Scott in the movie is now voicing a completely different version of Scott. I think that's great. But there is also that part of my brain going, how does he not bring up the fact that both versions of Sonic were played by Urkel? Come on, man. I thought that part was a fucking layup. Envy Adams' performance at Scott's funeral. The Weep Not For Your Memory song. I was laughing so hard at that. Like, it's a funeral. People are actually, for the most part, sad. And then this happens, and then Knives goes from mourning at her boyfriend's funeral, or maybe her fake boyfriend, depending on which side of the relationship you view it on, and then just be like, I love you. It's so funny. The scene with young Neil, young Neil is fucking hilarious in this, by the way. When they're on the movie set, it's him and Ramona, and they're in like a golf cart, and he's like, do you know in America, they call these Mario Karts? That got a big laugh out of me. And then it's the way the conversation goes after, it's like, no, I'm from America. No, they don't. Oh. Did you know that in Japan, they call these Mario Karts? The jam session between Knives and Kim, for me, like, them seeing sparks, I do not see as like a romantic thing at all. I just see the sparks as like a form of passion, and it's very oftenly played as romantic, but here I feel like it's just them vibing with each other, and like them feeling the passion, like the shared love of music. I just really, really like it. Like, it's genuinely one of my favorite scenes in the whole show. I think the joke that made me laugh the hardest is Matthew Patel talking about how he like had an off-Broadway one-man show, and he starts singing Agony, and it's a one-man show. He's doing both of the Prince's parts. Because I watched the entire show with my friend Wyatt, and like when we got to that, I was like crying with laughter, and I was like, okay, I have to explain to you why this joke is so funny. Agony, both the, like, it's a song and Into the Woods. There's two versions. There's a song and then it's a reprise, and it's of the two princes basically just trying to out-ham each other and talk about how I'm more miserable than you. Well, I'm more miserable than you. And it's so fucking funny. And then Wyatt's just like, oh my god, the joke is that he's trying to out-ham himself. I'm like, yes, this is gold. That was like my favorite joke in the show. That whole, the United States of whatever scene of Lucas Lee just like doing his skateboard shit. I've just had that stuck in my head for like 2 weeks now. Like, my brain in any context is like, yeah, whatever. Like, I love it. I thought it was great. The whole scene of Gordon Goose, because he's not getting Graves at that point, but Gordon Goose and Lucas Lee just becoming best friends and like fucking up Julie's house is really funny. Just Julie in general, I think, is really funny. There's a scene where someone asks Wallace, like, about acting, like, oh, you ever tried to be an actor before? I think the response was, I considered it, but I worried I'd be too good at it. Wallace is gold. I think almost everything he says is fucking hilarious. There's another line he also has. He was like, yeah, but I mean, why be Wallace Wells for free? This is how I have it written in my notes. Quote, Lucas's wide ass in the backpack, end quote. It's the fact that, like, his huge ass body is able to fit in Ramona's backpack. That got a really big laugh out of me, too. I think it happens again with someone else. I want to say it's Scott. And, like, it's kind of funny. It's not nearly as funny as seeing Lucas inside of it. Gordon Goose and his no fear, it's like we called him Fearless because he had no fear shirts that he wore every day. The scene when Knives and Steven go to Matthew to try to propose the show, and he's like, I have 30 seconds available next Tuesday. Let's make this happen. It's just like throws the fucking like contact card. That got a laugh out of me. At one point, the credit song to an episode was Ring of Fire, and I remember just kind of doing a double game. I was like, wait, what the fuck? Why? Man, it's because the song is great. That's why. That's all I needed. It's like, I love Ring of Fire, but I was just really shocked to hear it like just show up. And then for the final episode, it's a remix of the Mortal Kombat theme, but instead of just naming characters from Mortal Kombat, it's just naming the cast of the show. I thought that was great. Just the idea of the robot is a pure vegan because as a robot, it's never eaten any kind of food. Like, there's no meat anywhere in its body, so it can make the best portals. That was fucking funny. The scene of the twins talking to Scott in the on the way to the Broadway show, like, was it you two that put the nanomachines? Like, are you guys trying to sabotage my relationship with Ramona? No, bro. Our robot told us we're bros in the future. Later, bro. I loved that. Like, that's like the best resolution. When Scott's in the future, so that the VR shit, it's through a virtual boy. And Wallace's husband works at Nintendo, which is great in and of its own as a joke. Except the uncle works at Nintendo. Like, yeah, my husband does. And on the ceiling, it's just a thing of Pikachu's tail. I loved that. There's the fact that Ramona can travel through time because her roller skates are made from parts of a DeLorean. And it only works if she goes up to 88 miles an hour. Back to the Future is one of my favorite movies of all time. So I loved that. Just that whole time travel scene with Scott and Future Scott. I think he's like still wearing a mask. I just thought looked really cool. As I don't like it as much as like the scene from the end of Sonny Boy, but it kind of reminded me of that scene at the end of Sonny Boy. And there's this one conversation with Ramona and Scott where they say something about a famous detective. He's like, oh, she used like, yeah, it's like you were doing an investigation like that famous detective. You mean Columbo? No, I meant Pikachu. I loved it. I very clearly loved it. I'm sorry I don't have like I didn't want to be like, this is my like strong analysis of everything. I'm like, I just had a good fucking time. I just want to talk about how fun it was, about how wacky it was. It was great. If you haven't seen it, go watch it. I feel like it is something you can better appreciate if you have an understanding of how the series works. So at least watch the movie or kind of have an understanding of the basic plot of the movie. I can't wait for the Broadway show. I feel like that's or the off-Broadway show. I feel like the musical is probably the next way they're gonna try to adapt this story. Dude, I can't wait to like watch the Tony Award. Oh God, I have a friend that like performs in stage shows. I haven't seen him in a long time. Like I went to school with him, like hung out with him a bunch. No, I mean they probably try to get the cast of the movie. But maybe one day I could see him as Scott Pilgrim and be like, that's fucking weird. This feels like some meta shit, even though I know it's not. Anyways, it's great. Go watch it if you have the chance. Bye.